G'day and welcome to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. Today we are joined by a very special guest, the 2022 number one ranked coach, the winner of the Hilux, Matt Mottram. We're going to pick his brain, talking all things about starting AFL fantasy squads. Let's go!
She's done it from nowhere. Hoisted the goal from inside the field. Shade from the boundary. Dusty. Petty. Petrarca. Oh, wow. How good is that? The legend becomes immortal.
G'day and welcome again to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Casey, and you can find me on Twitter at Ball Boys Fantasy. And again, joined once again by the newbie.
Newbie. Don't call me that, mate.
Wow, newbie to the podcasting world, I'd say.
Luke Rogerson at LukeRojo17 on Twitter.
And also joined by the becoming famous personality in the AFL fantasy community, Matt Mottram. Welcome to the show, mate. Good to have you on.
Oh, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. Been a follower of yours for a while for the basketball, mate, so it's good to see you getting into the AFL. You did quite well last year.
Yeah, well, I was saying to you just before the show we started recording that it was very interesting to sort of. I was up there, very up high, close to the buys. We won't talk about what happened after the buys, but I was sort of scoping out my competition and looked at you in the number one ranked spot and discovered that you were already following me because of the fantasy basketball side of things. So that was pretty cool to sort of see that the Australian fantasy community spreads across different platforms. So, no, it's good to have you on. I'm sure you'll give this podcast a little bit of credibility.
It needs it.
This little makeshift hat in the front here. How are you doing since you won the car and won the comp last year? Has it all settled in? I know you've been doing a lot of interviews and stuff like that with several different podcasts. How's it all feeling since the finish?
Haven't been doing a lot over the break. Obviously finished up. I work in a school, finished up, and just been really taking it easy and enjoying the basketball mostly, and not really thinking about fantasy except for a few little interviews I've had to do here and there. So
how is your fantasy basketball season going? Just while we're here,
it's not too bad. I'm in one cash league with mates who it's pretty competitive. It's only 10 team this year, so it makes it a bit different. But I'm sort of like sitting around fourth, but it's pretty competitive, pretty close. Not sure if I got the team to win it, but we'll see how we go.
Yeah, right. Who'd you start the team with? Who was your first round?
I sort of went that strategy that Josh Lloyd talks about, that even approach, because it's a bidding auction.
Yep, salary cap. Auction draft. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I ended up trading for Halliburton, so I've got him sort of leading the way for me.
Okay, cool. No, I like him. I've got him in the. What have I got him in? The Fantasy Basketball World Cup team. I've got a few leagues running.
This is quickly turning into a basketball podcast, guys.
Yeah.
Let's steer back to footy. First of all, obviously you were the winner last year. But what have you? I know you've been playing AFL Fantasy for a little while. What was your best finish, or how high have you finished before taking it out last year? And sort of what's your road been up until that point?
I haven't really done it super seriously until about 2 years ago.
Yep.
I used to do it for a bit of fun, but I didn't really give all my time to it. And I put a bit more time into it a few years ago, and I'll do a bit of work with students in a high school, and one of the students was like ranked 1,000 after week one. So I pretty much ran and helped him run his team for the year, and we took it to 18th that year.
Wow,
so
impressive.
He ended up giving me his 18th cap. This was 2 years ago, so I was pretty stoked to have that. Myself, I think it was around 400th or something in fantasy was the highest I finished. I never really got up there. Yeah. But look, it's a hard game to master, and you got to have luck on your side as well.
Yeah, it is a game that definitely revolves around. Well, there's obviously a lot of skill, and you've got to make the right decisions at the right times. But there is definitely a huge luck element component to it. So, and it's only getting more competitive, in my opinion. I think the amount of platforms and podcasts out there, all the information that's growing. The CBA numbers, as an example, are more readily available. So I think to finish anywhere close to that top 1,000, 2,000 is is a really good finish. So
it's an achievement for sure. Now, Matt, I must admit I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with you. Now that I've met you, you seem like a good bloke, but I must admit, looking at the rankings every week last year, I thought, I hate this bloke. He's sitting pretty up the top. We're all cellar dwellers down the bottom, but you seem like a good fella now, so I'm glad you got the Hilux. But interestingly, Mitch having the NBA pod, I think we might have a few new listeners here and maybe a few new fantasy people. So I want to pick your brains a little bit on what would be sort of your number one piece of advice for somebody starting fresh with fantasy footy.
I suppose, first of all, just enjoy it. Like, play it and enjoy it. I think that's the best thing you can do, even if it means picking a couple of players you really like and having them in your team. I think just as a beginner, that's really essential. Other than that, I think following feeds on Twitter. There's certain feeds on Twitter. You need to have an account on Twitter, have a presence on Twitter, and follow some of the accounts. Otherwise, you're not going to keep up with all the things that they're talking fantasy, I think. You boys would have a presence on Twitter, I'm guessing.
We're working on it.
No, Mitch has got a good one. He's encouraging me to dip my toes in the water. So I think I might be at 20 followers at the moment. So I'm really flying.
That's a good reminder. Everyone go follow Luke Rogerson on Twitter. That's Luke Rojo17.
I desperately need the help, people. Please.
But no, we will be tweeting out our opinions, but also some stats and interesting things that we find throughout the preseason, and also obviously when the season starts. You would know that come Thursday night teams, even leading up to those Friday night lockouts, a lot can change in a very short period of time, and with the rolling lockout, especially now these days, it is something that you do have to be switched on pretty constantly over your weekend, which some people like, some people don't like. We'll sort of maybe touch on that later. But again, I think what we want to focus today's podcast is, I know obviously we're in January at the moment. We're still very early in the preseason, so I want to really maybe focus in on your starting squad philosophies. We might talk about your starting squad from last year and really just hone in on there, and maybe talk a bit more trades and rest of the season down the line. But so when we're talking preseason, Matt, how do you approach this part of the preseason, or how did you approach it last year? Are you usually getting into it about this time, and also how do you go about collating all the data and sort of stuff that's out there at the moment?
Well, last year, I sort of started drafting teams and thinking about it, I think in November, December.
Yeah, right.
I was on it really early, and I actually had the goal in my head. I said to a few students, I'm going to actually try and win it this year. So it's funny that it actually worked out that way.
You've done LeBron James. You've called it before you've won it.
I didn't really think I would, but you got to go into it thinking that you're a chance. Yeah. And I did, and I did the research, and I just started sifting through ideas and playing with it. Nothing concrete, I don't have spreadsheets or anything like that. I just sort of make notes and write down different options, and then that sort of evolves as the preseason evolves.
Yeah. So you're not a spreadsheet man. Are you using other sort of, I guess,
data collection
tools or any other facilities or anything like that at all?
Well, there's a lot of good. I listen to a lot of the pods. I think it's essential that you listen to the main AFL fantasy pods. So, do you want me to list them off here for advice for everyone?
Ball Boys, AFL Fantasy.
Yeah, number one, Ball Boys. Yeah. No, do you want me to give
absolutely.
There's a bunch of good information out there, yeah. What ones are your main ones that you listen to?
Well, first of all, I encourage everyone to go sign up to the Mariah Magic footy AFL Fantasy platform.
That. I was a member last year and also the year before that. It's a really good platform, so I can co-sign that one.
And it goes to a great cause, to Starlight Foundation. So he's a great guy, Selby. And look, the weekly feeds and even the preseason stuff you get there on players, that helps you with your research and coming down. Say you're picking between one player and another player, it can give you some crucial stats to make that decision. So that's pretty good, I think. Have you ever heard of Plus Six podcast with Pete and Jeppa?
Yep, I'm familiar.
They're really ratings. Good throughout AFL ratings. So follow Pete, AFL ratings. You'll get all your news through him, even if you can't keep abreast yourself. Follow him. Guys at Hat Chat. You heard of the guys at the Hat Chat? They're excellent. And then there's the Pod, and of course, make sure you listen to and follow the AFL Traders. Those guys are legends, and you got to be listening to them every week. So they're such a great great bunch
Just
of guys
just
to
for the
listen to.
entertainment value, those boys are worth a listen, aren't they? They're funny boys. They are for sure.
I also
They
do find obviously they've got a very large audience, probably one of the largest in the community, and I think even if you disagree with some of their opinions and what they're saying, it can also be good to be in tune with the general consensus of the AFL fantasy community, and if you have a differing opinion, then you sort of know that perhaps, okay, if I'm thinking this, but everyone else is thinking this, I might be going against the grain a little bit here. So there's a lot of information out there, but I don't know if you would agree with this, Matt, but you still got to form your own opinion. And just
100%.
everyone's, sometimes it can sound like an echo chamber with everyone sort of repeating the same things. But I think last year, talking starting squads, in my opinion, I started with Andrew Brayshaw last year, and he was one of the biggest successful picks of mine, and he wasn't really getting talked about a lot. I think, from memory, the Statesman was one of the guys that mentioned him a little bit, but it wasn't really something that was getting talked about a lot. So, and I still stuck with my guns and picked him, ended up being a decent selection. I know you were successful with your pick with Tim English last year, and I don't think he was getting talked about a lot. So, you still got to, I think, back yourself in there. Would you agree with that?
100%. I mean, there's a certain amount of information out there that everyone's going to have similarities in their team. So a lot of the rookies, even some of the mid-prices, everyone knows about them. You're going to have them in your squad. I would say don't be different just to be different. Yep. But if you're set and confident on something and you know something, have a gut feel on something, back yourself, start them in your team, and, that can really catapult you up the rankings if you get that right. Yeah,
absolutely. It was good to hear you say then, Matt, that you're not a spreadsheet man either, because I think sometimes people get this notion, if I'm going to win it, if I'm going to go for a hat, I need to have 16,000 spreadsheets and formulas and all these things. So it's nice to hear that, I think, for people listening, that you can be very successful without diving into it too deeply. Now, we couldn't talk about 2022 without mentioning Braden Preuss. Mitch desperately wants to know what led you to start with him on your bench. Am I correct in saying that you started with Preussy on your bench as a value option last year? And what led you to that decision?
Was he suspended first round or something like that? I'm trying to remember.
So I think he was it suspended or injured? I know I think it was suspension.
He had too many things going last year.
We were pretty confident he was coming back around too. But I'm looking at your starting squad here. Yeah, you've got Grundy and English as your starting rucks, and then Preuss on the bench. Just wanted to get your thought press behind that. I know we're probably asking a lot for the memory there, but
doing a deep dive.
No, look, I do remember because I listened to everyone in the preseason. That's part of my research, and there's a lot about the set and forget Gawn and Grundy ruck combo.
Yep.
And I just wasn't super confident in both of them. So, and Gawn was pretty highly priced. And one of the things I do with my starting squads, and most people know this, is you look for value. You look for guys who can outscore their average or what they're priced at. And Gawn is really highly priced. And I heard a bit about English as well, some really positive things. And getting on news feeds, like I heard that he put on a bit of muscle, that he was going to take over the number one mantle, and Jack McRae said stuff about his leadership and how well he's doing, and I thought I'd back English in. But getting back to Preuss, I just thought he's a great cash cow option, gives you flexibility on the bench. Yes, it's going to cost me a little bit more on the bench, but I've got that back up there, and if something goes wrong on the rucks, if Grundy doesn't work out, I can use him and switch it around, and in the end it actually worked out that way for me.
Yeah, it is interesting because obviously I think it was a couple of years ago, or maybe a few years ago now, that Riley O'Brien was a successful cash cow that was a little bit more expensive than maybe you'd want to pay for someone on your bench, but ended up being someone good enough that you could throw into your field. And now Preuss was a similar kind of pick in that vein, and especially the fact that he wasn't starting in round one. It was a ballsy move, but obviously one that early season definitely seemed to pay off, and not many people would have done that. So yeah, kudos for you for making that move. I wanted to get your thoughts on round one last year. I'm looking at your team here. You've gone and you've got 30 green dots. I noticed that you've got the emergency here on Corey Durden. My question is, if you had the emergency on Nick Martin in round one when he scored his big 130, would you have looped him in to get that score and taken carried a red dot into your round one team, or are you a 30 green dots man?
I'm not essentially a 30 green dots man, but I do think it's a good idea to have him if you can.
Is there a line? Is there like a point at which you go, that's worth taking?
I mean, if I had Nick Martin's score there, I probably would have been tempted to loop it. But as the year went on, I had so many injuries. There were so many red dots that having that one less rookie who's generating cash, it actually catches up with you, and it doesn't really help you in the long run. So if you can see my round one team, I had all the big scores on the bench.
Yeah.
So I didn't start that well, and I missed out on them.
Yeah.
I missed out on them, but sometimes you get those calls wrong.
Yeah.
And but it still didn't hurt me in the long run.
It's an interesting one because I was someone that did have Nick Martin as an emergency. I took that score, and I obviously the person I filled that score with was then Elijah Hollins, and I was listening, I think, to an interview with the guy who came second, and I think he was in a similar boat, and so I'm wondering, it's very hard to tell those kind of things, like how much it hurt you and how much it affected you moving on, because I don't think I particularly remember struggling too much with cash. But again, I did peak in the buy rounds and faded towards the end. So maybe that little bit of extra cash might have helped me in the back half of the season. But again, it's a tricky one to know exactly how much that 30th player would have helped you in a season-long game. So, that's an interesting take.
Kind of talking rookies kind of segues into our next question, Matt, as well. You mentioned before you're obviously listening to all the pods. Is that the same way that you sort of find the best rookies to pick, or is there anything specifically that you do in terms of rookies? Because I know a lot of people starting off, they go, oh yeah, I know that player, I've seen that player play, but when it comes to the rookies, it's obviously a little bit difficult, a little bit more difficult, should I say, to get intel. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I don't know if you know, one of the guys on Twitter who I'm good friends with, Jepper, he does a few segments called Jepper's Juniors, and he's really good at knowing which rooks are good. So I'd say look out for what he says about the rookies. Also just look at listen to what the coaches say, because normally leading up to round one, you hear what the coaches are going to say about who's going to start and who's going to get a game, and I'd follow that.
Do you think that, like, are you prioritising job security, scoring ability? Is there, or just sort of a general mixture of the two, or is one more important in your eyes when it comes to rookies?
Look, you'd like them to have job security, but sometimes you can't be 100% guaranteed. I mean, guys like Nick Dacos, you knew straight away he's a gun, he's got job security, it's a no-brainer. You'd think someone this year like Will Ashcroft is going to be the same. Those guys are easy picks, but it's the fringe ones when you're trying to fill up your bench. It's just, keeping an eye on news feeds and what's going on out there, whether you pick them or not.
Yeah, because I know last year I think I faded Rochelle in round one in favour just to get that little bit of extra cash, and I thought, because he's playing a half-forward kind of role, like he's a good player, but I didn't think that role was suited for scoring. And of course, he comes out and scores 100 in the first round, and that kickstarts his cash generation. So I think my learnings from that last year is that sometimes I think you just got to pay up for some of those rookies that have that pedigree coming in, and they're sort of locked into the side, and it only takes one or two scores for them to really go gangbusters and for the cash to start ticking over. Next question for you here, mate, is we're thinking about sort of like how you go about deciding your teams when it comes to preseason games. It's a very hectic time when it comes to adjusting your team. There's a whole lot of information that comes out. You're talking about people who score really well. I think a couple of years ago, Jaden Short comes out and scores 170, and everyone jumps onto him. Like, how much weight do you put into the preseason games, the scores, and what exactly are you looking for when it comes time for those preseason games?
I think they're important, and you need to put some weight on them. It's not just important who's playing, it's important who's not playing. So you might have some of the big guns out, and so some of the lesser lights are getting bigger scores because of it. So you got to take note, firstly, of who isn't playing. The main reason for the preseason, I think, is to watch the rookies, watch how they're performing, how the coach is playing them. And also, guys who change clubs, say, for example, I'm a Bombers man. I'm a big fan of Will Setterfield. So he's going to the Bombers this year, and there's a lot of articles out there already about him coming across because he wanted an inside midfield role. Yeah, right. So if he gets the inside midfield role, I'm not sure I'd select him, but it'd be pretty good value if he plays in the guts all day and gets that role. Yeah, so things like that. Yeah, watching the roles and just, how they're playing in the preseason is important.
It's definitely spot on. Like something we spoke about on the last pod was that you can't just be heavily reliant on looking at the stats and following Twitter. You do need to watch the games because sometimes the stats lie. You got to watch how players score their points. Otherwise, you can be in all sorts of trouble if their role changes or if the game style changes.
Yeah,
and with the I was just going to say with the main guys, you big dogs, they don't really take the preseason super serious.
Nah, that's it, eh? Teams
they're having to run
run so many
around.
numbers through the midfield sometimes in preseason games. 15 midfielders and you wouldn't know where to look. So that's a good point.
So if you set on someone, say you set on Jack Steele or something, and he comes out and he gets an 80 and he's just blowing out some cobwebs, and don't change your mind, based on one game, unless there's a major role change. If you see a major role change, that's when you got to take note.
On that, what do you think about players who miss preseason games or don't play any? Like, for example, I know that I think it was I was looking at Jordan Dawson last year, and I think he missed both preseason games, but still fronted up for round one. Looking at again your team here, I fell into the exact same trap and selected a Wayne Millerer. I think for him, I fell into the trap a bit there of having him in my team all preseason, just assuming that I'd locked him away. He's good value, and when he wasn't sort of playing, it was like, oh shit, I've got to find a replacement, and it kind of threw my structure out. So when he was named, I sort of went, oh, okay, I can plug him back in and go back to that structure that I was happy with. But it ended up being the wrong call. Do you think that do you have a rule where if they don't play a preseason game, you can't select them round one, or what are your thoughts on that kind of a scenario?
Look, I think if someone's battling an injury and doesn't do a full preseason, definitely don't start him, I reckon.
Yeah.
If he's had a full preseason and then just got a little injury, it's a sort of a 50-50 call. I think I remember that with Dawson, and I liked him, but I didn't start him because of that injury. But I got him in pretty early. But as you touched on Miller, it just shows you I had a far from perfect starting squad. Yeah. And I think from memory in the back line last year, we were really struggling for rookies.
It was Paddy McCutton, and that was it.
Yeah, so you're really looking for some guys to fit in there. And, I think I had Sicily in my team, and I swapped him out last minute to get some cash elsewhere and put Miller in.
Yeah. Oh, no.
And then,
you would have won one more.
So the first trade in the first week was a correction trade, bring in Sicily, get rid of Miller, and it really just made a massive difference to my team. So you don't have to have a perfect starting squad.
Now, talking starting squads, this is one I'm really interested to pick your brain on. In terms of how you go about adjusting your team during the preseason, are you the kind of person who kind of puts it in and then just tinkers with parts, or do you go, hey, I've set a team up, and then you take a screenshot and then you wipe the whole slate clean and start fresh build from the bottom up, or are you more of a tinkerer?
Yeah, I think I'm more of a tinkerer. You put your players in. You might have a few guys, for example, in the forward line this year. Most of us will start Josh Dunkley. He's a forward. He's going to be playing in the midfield. And so maybe you have, Taranto and Caniglio in there. Like, you'll have your main premiums in there, and then you'll sort of tinker around that. And I more play with structure. So the rookies, you got to wait to see which rookies are available.
Yeah.
And the rookies will dictate your lines, like where your primos are, where your rookies are, and how many you have in each line.
Okay.
So if there's no rookies in a line, then you got to fill it out somehow another way. So that'll dictate your structure in other areas. Does that make sense?
Yes, that was sort of my sort of follow-up question was, based on what you said there, you're kind of building from the rookies up. You're going, okay, what rookies have I got in, and then what money does that leave me for premiums, or is that sort of what I'm getting there?
Yeah, it sort of goes hand in hand. Rookies dictate a lot of your structure, because if you don't have rookies in a line, then you have to fill out with mid-prices and lower-price guys. But I also have my main premiums in there as well, and you get a pretty good idea once the competition opens up how the salary cap can fit out your team.
AFL Fantasy, we're waiting, guys. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. So at the moment, it's hard to play around with it, but it is very early.
Yeah, it is. I think I agree with you in terms of those rookies, that they definitely dictate your structure. I'm a big fan of, once those preseason games come along and we have a better idea of the rookies and who's probably going to be there for round one, starting fresh and just deleting my team and then maybe putting those rookies in first, and then adding in the guys that I absolutely want to make part of my team that I'm locking in, and then the guys I'm a bit on the fence. Okay, who can I put where, and doing it that way. But I don't think that there's a right or wrong way. But I do agree with you that obviously don't force. And I think this is a learning from last year. Don't force a structure that you've had all preseason just because it's been the way you've done it when the rookies don't allow it. And I think the Wayne Miller example is kind of an example of that, where we didn't have the rookies available in the defence, we kind of needed to go a bit heavier and spend a bit more money in that line than maybe we were doing, a month before the season started.
Yeah, I think Wayne Miller was giving a lot of people nightmares there after the first couple of rounds. So
he got dropped, I'm pretty sure, after round
we
one.
We weren't alone on that one. Yeah. We weren't alone. Now, next one for you, Matt. I'm interested to hear this one as well. Is what sort of time breakdown would you say that you spend on fantasy? Because again, there's probably people out there thinking, do I have to spend 18 hours of every day on fantasy footy, or what sort of time do you spend both pre-season and then in season?
This year, not much so far.
Yeah,
but last year, the year I won it. Yeah, last year, the year I won it, I was like, already just making some notes. Look, you can be smart with the way you use your time.
Yep.
Like I've got a commute to work that's about 50 minutes to an hour, so I'll listen to pods on the way to work on the way back. So that fills in a couple of hours of the day.
That's perfect.
I'm getting information that way without wasting my time,
Yep.
It's hard to put an actual figure on how much time you spend, but I don't know. I think everyone's different, but just taking notes, marking things in your Twitter feed and stuff. Like I got a message system set up with my dad.
Yeah.
So when something comes in Twitter, right, that I'm interested in for fantasy, I'll shoot it through to him, and then I can just feed back through the messages, and we can bounce off them.
Yeah, nice.
So it's a way to keep
work smarter, not harder.
I think that's stay together. Is that right?
Families that fantasy together. I like it.
I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but you definitely need to spend time thinking about it and following stuff for sure.
I think it's good advice, and most people will find a little bit of time in their day, whether it's, like you said, in your commute to work, or whether you're at the gym, to just throw the earphones in and listen to a podcast. So I think that's manageable for most people. So it kind of doesn't limit hat winners to people who are spending, like I said, 18 hours a day.
Well, I was going to follow that up. Do you think there's a point at which you can spend too much time overthinking it and sort of getting in your own head? Because I found that when I was a bit higher up and experienced that sort of double-digit rank for the first time, I spent maybe a bit too much time overthinking some of my trades, and maybe my initial thought was the best thought, and double guess myself a bit too much. Do you think that that's a possibility? And did you experience that? I mean, obviously you won it last year, so maybe not. But do you think that that's a possibility?
100%. I reckon you're spot on. My season was sort of a split into two halves. The first half and into the buys, I was really backing myself, and I didn't really think too much about my decisions. A little bit, I evaluated them a little bit, but just backed my gut. And then the last half, obviously, I took the lead very early, and being a fan of fantasy, I knew people don't hold on to leads very long. It's very rare.
Yeah, it is rare.
So I put a lot more time into thinking about my decisions, and it probably didn't help me as much as I thought it would. And I was second-guessing myself a few times, and when I went back to trusting my gut, it seemed to work better. So, yeah, definitely.
I think so. And I guess the other thing is that the last couple of seasons, the rolling lockout has been another little spice that's been added to fantasy, where a couple of seasons ago we were Thursday night partial lockout, Friday night full lockout. Now it's something you've got to be keeping on top of: injuries, late outs, all those kind of things moving forward. Yeah. So it can take its toll. Are you a fan of the rolling lockout, or are you a kick your feet up Friday night kind of man?
Well, the reason I got into fantasy in the first place is because I had the lockout on Friday night. Yeah. I used to play another game. We won't name what that game was. I had a rolling lockout, and I had some quite successful years in that. And I thought, it takes up a lot of your time. I'll more time than fantasy, because at least in the weekend you can just sort of switch off.
You want to enjoy it at some point. You don't want to be anxious about, is this play going to be laid out? Yeah, I'm with you, mate. I'm with you.
And then, fantasy and COVID happened, and everything's history now. It's all rolling lockout. So,
do you think your experience with that other format helps you with the last couple of years, obviously, being a bit more accustomed to that rolling lockout strategy and, things like looping and vice captains and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, look, I think it definitely helped me. Doesn't take long to get used to it and work it out. So, but yeah, it helped me initially, but wouldn't have taken others long to go into that one.
It took me a little while. Last year was my first year, and I think I had to take a Robbie McComb vice captain score at one point because I stuffed up the loop. So that won't be happening this year. Yeah, hopefully.
I feel like we've all done that at least one point in our AFL fantasy careers. So.
Yeah, you got to have at least one. So that was me last year.
So we'll come to an end in a second here, but before we do, just wanted to get maybe your takes on a few. Let's go maybe through each line. I know you said obviously the game's not out yet, and you haven't had too much of a think about it just yet, but maybe one person in each line that you thinking will be a good improvement this year, or maybe present some value, or you think that team should be looking at. I'll leave the criteria quite open. Someone that you're just interested in watching from each line. Let's start with maybe the defenders.
Well, it's hard. I haven't really looked at the defenders much. I think this year the defenders and the rucks are probably the two most challenging lines to pick.
I agree, for sure.
I haven't given the defenders a real strong look. One of the guys I like is one of my boys from the Bombers, Andy McGrath.
Yep.
If he's looking fit in the preseason, so I just need to see his role. But if he's got a nice role across halfback, he can accumulate it. So,
do you think he's better off halfback than in the middle attending CBAs?
I think so.
Yeah.
It depends how Brad Scott's going to play him, but I think he can rack it up a fair bit across there. Yeah. It is a juicy role in AFL fantasy, that halfback role. I know Jaden Short scored high when he was playing that last year, and when he went to the midfield, he really took a dip. So the halfback role, like that Doherty role, it can really be quite high scoring if you're the right type of player. So I need to have a closer look at him. And then there's, I think, also Jack Bowers is quite cheap at Geelong, who went to Geelong.
Oh, yes, from Gold Coast. Is that? Yeah,
he'll be one to watch.
About 400, so he's another one to watch.
Especially a new team. We'll have to keep an eye on him during the preseason.
Yeah.
That's an interesting name. What about in the mids?
In the mids, obviously a lot of people are talking about Dom Sheed already.
Yeah.
For me, he's well priced, so you want to watch him. And yeah, I'm probably not saying anything that no one already knows. Another player I said already, Setterfield. Another player I like. I don't think I'd choose him. I traded him out after round 2 last year. Matt Rao. I don't think he's priced well enough to pick, but
no.
I don't know. He looks like he's a year over his injuries. He's working on his game in terms of spreading, getting more ball on the outside, and he was a fantasy stud. So
he was.
It wouldn't surprise me.
He promises so much. If he can just take a few marks, get a couple of +6s, he will be a stud again, hopefully.
It was
I don't think I'd pick him. Yeah.
About the forwards.
I don't think I have anybody off the top of my head besides Ben Cunnington, maybe.
Yeah.
He's not super cheap. He's around that 600, I think.
I think he's.
But I think the biggest question is how many of those top elite midfielders are you going to put in your forward line out of Dunkley, Caniglio, Taranto, Rosie, and there's a few others. Like, how many are you going to start? That could dictate how low you go.
I think that's the question. Hey, it's going to be a structure question for the forwards. And do you have a forward in your midfield potentially, just because of the values there? And then lastly, those nasty bloody big fellas, the rucks. So I know obviously you did well with your rucks last season. Is there a structure that you think? Do you think there is value in the rucks this year, or is there a set and forget? With maybe a couple other players involved there?
Look, English is the obvious standout, I reckon, just because he's going to be the number one ruck.
Yeah.
Lob's not a ruckman. He's a chop out. He's a forward. So there's not that danger of Steph Martin coming in and taking his role. So he should get a good run in it. So you'd think English is a good pick, but he isn't cheap. Second rucks, it's a real tough one. Cameron looks like a good pick if he gets the sole ruck.
Yeah.
If Mason Cock plays again, I don't know. You have to watch that one. What I've seen of Grundy this preseason, he looks super fit. Like, he looks really lean, really fit.
So you consider potentially going that to, I guess, English and Grundy are both premium options. You consider just going with those two to begin with rather than looking for a value option?
Look, it's just things like that when I see how fit he's looking.
Yeah.
I just take note of it and I watch it in the preseason, because if he's going to split with Max, he's probably not a good pick. But you just have to see how he plays and how Melbourne play him. He's not really a great forward. So
yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Of the two of them, you're going to play Gawn forward before you play Grundy forward. So that probably suggests that perhaps Grundy gets a little bit more time in the middle. So we'll have to see how that evolves, hey?
Yeah, but there's a few cheap picks like Lloyd Meek and a few others. So you just got to watch and see who presents themselves. But I'm not set and forgetting the rocks this year.
All good advice there. I like a lot of those picks. So thank you so much, Matt, for jumping on the podcast, mate. I really appreciate you spending your time with us. Where can everyone find you? Not that, obviously our huge following of fans can come and boost your followers, but where can people find you on Twitter, and what have you got going on these days, man?
It's just at Matt Mottram on Twitter. It's pretty basic, my name. That's the main source to follow me. I can't really answer everyone's questions, but I'll try and make a few comments here and there where I can. But I'm not really on there to answer everyone's questions. More there just to follow the news and obviously communicate with a few of the guys online.
Yeah, no worries, mate. We can take the brunt of those questions for you. So, direct them over to us on Twitter. And thank you guys for listening along to the podcast and the show today on YouTube. Make sure if you are watching on YouTube, you hit that subscribe button. Give us a big thumbs up if you appreciate all that we're doing. You can also drop some comments, any questions we can answer on today's show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, make sure you're following us along. Next week, we're going to go through some defenders, talking about some undervalued players that we may be fading and think overvalued, as well as a lot of mid prices. So until next time, guys, we will catch you guys later. Bye.